Okay. In the news, we have noticed that African American communities are being oppressed against by police, and then we also noticed that in the border we have noticed a lot of people trying to smuggle in drugs in the most creative ways possible. These are all effects that have been caused by the war on drugs. What the war on drugs is that it's a program that has been started in the 1970s by Richard Nixon to stop any abuse of drugs and the trades of drugs. When I'm talking about drugs, I'm talking about marijuana, heroin, and cocaine, and some recreational drugs such as these. The ways that the war on drugs have tried to stop this is by implementing a prohibition of these illegal drugs. So there is no sales of these, and there's no allowed uses of these. Going on to this is that the war on drugs also has a police intervention to stop these trades as well. So firstly, I wanted to have my preposition in saying that the war on drugs has a negative effect into our nation overall. So firstly, I wanted to point out that it has a discrimination against minorities. Second, I wanted to point out that it has no impact into the drugs economy. Third, it has a negative effect into our nation's economy. And fourthly, I wanted to summarize that it has compared to a unregulated drug policy, that having that would benefit our economy more. So first, I want to talk about the discrimination of drugs. So the drugpolicy.org has said that the higher rates of arrests and incarcerations are not only caused by communities that have major suspicions of drugs, but are more focused on low-income areas. Police go in there and expect that any minority has any affiliation with drugs. Jonathan Rothwell, who works for Metropolitan Policy Program, has done research on labor market economics. He has said that the risk for violent and property crimes has decreased, and violent and drug offended crimes has increased since the war on drugs has been implemented. Blacks are 5 times more likely to be arrested than whites since the war on drugs policy has been implemented. Since the 1980s, it has risen of incarceration of blacks to 23%, and in 1991 it has increased to 41%. So these all are pointing out these all prove that there is discrimination against minorities due to the war on drugs. Now we'll be talking about how it has no impact to the drug economy. Benjamin Powell, who is the director of the Free Market Institute of Texas Tech, has pointed out that since we're cutting the supply of these drugs, there is the only thing it has caused is a price increase. Demand does not stop because these are consumers that are just addicts. They'll do anything to have this product. This is called a price inelastic when supply is being cut, but there is no decrease of the demand. Since this, there's an increase of price for a little amount of drugs, so it would allow cartels have increased revenue. With this increased revenue, they can have more money put into hiring more people into their organization and have more efficient ways to smuggle these drugs. These all point out the effects that has no impact onto the drug economy that the war on drugs tries on doing. The negative effects that hurts our economy are that since these drugs are being purchased, there's no taxes implemented into these drugs. So we're not getting any money back from us when these drugs are being bought. Powell will continue on saying that the government spends $57 billion annually to continue this program to be running. How that means the incarceration prices and hiring these police. So 500,000 are incarcerated, and these are being paid by taxes alone. Through these incarcerations, these are becoming more expensive and overpopulated throughout the years. But if we create if there's creating an addictive treatment centers would allow it to be more cheaper result. Daryl Girl, who is working for Bureau of Justice Statistics, has said that having these addictive treatment centers would be $20,000 less per person annually. These are all the negative points for, these are all the points that show that there is negative effects into our economy. Now I'm going to be comparing it to an unregulated policy into an economy. Palish Ghosh, who works for Business Journalist, has said that legalizing would save the government $41 billion annually. $8.7 billion of this would be from marijuana purchases. We already noticed that in Colorado or in other states that have marijuana to be legal, have an increase of their budget and an increase and decrease of their debt. As well as other drugs, it would put $32 billion into our nation. What this would do is that having these drugs to be illegal would provide a budget into our nation, and it would decrease the debt into each of these states, which would save us a lot of money. So in summary, I wanted to point out that what the war on drugs has done is that it has discriminated against minorities, has no impact into the drug economy, and has a negative effect into the nation. And in comparison to an unregulated drug policy, is that the unregulated drug policy would have a better economic benefits. So my point is that the war on drugs has a negative effect into the economy.
Oh, please don't stand there. It makes it feel like you're a target and I'm shooting at you. I'm not, you know.
I didn't want to be behind.
No, it's okay. You can be behind. Because you know what? I'll turn around occasionally, but I'm talking to the camera most of the time anyway. Because that's where you're going. It's all going to be recorded. I think I told you guys that, right? That we let the camera run so the comments are there for you to listen to later. All right. Jonathan, I thought that there are a couple of big assumptions in the start of your speech, and I know that you're going to put them in your secondary claims, so I think maybe a different introduction would help you a little bit, but you were very clear when you finally got to it as to what your proposition was. The phrasing was a little bit awkward. I think it's not quite as consistent as it was when I was looking at your notes. I probably because you're trying not to read it, you maybe winged it a little bit. It was not imperfect and destructive. It was just like there's something there that didn't quite work. The contents are previewed pretty well. Same sort of thing with the secondary claims. I think that you want the sentences to be a little bit clearer, but everything's organized. I can see the order in which you're going. Your third and your fourth points were a little bit awkwardly phrased. Like I said, I think that's kind of where the problem is. So you did a good job signposting in the body of the speech. I think you kind of explained the assumptions behind the topic, except that there's an argument on the first point that is got a lot of statistical information. Some of it sounded like it was old. I thought I heard a reference to 1991 data at one point. And there's not really much of an explanation about why the burden falls on particular ethnic groups. It seems to be an assumption that there is something inherently racist about drug policy, as opposed to maybe groups who fit into particular ethnic categories have a higher rate of problems with this issue. So I'm not sure what the presumption is that you're trying to make here. I guess the argument is that because there's some problem with the way things are enforced because of incarceration, there's something wrong with incarceration of people for drugs, that burden falls most heavily on groups, and that there's something unfair about that. We have to be careful about the value argument, but the idea that this happens, I think that's a reasonable argument to make. The argument that there has been no effect on basically, the second argument says that these policies haven't had any effect on the level of use of drugs. There are, again, presuppositions built into here that I think you need more proof on, that the rate of drug use would alter with legalization or with an unregulated market, I think is going to be one of the main arguments that the response speaker could probably develop on this point. Your information here mostly just says, well, they're addicts, and so they're going to take this regardless of whatever the penalties are. But are there fewer addicts? Are there fewer people who are experimenting? Are there fewer people that consume these because of the laws? I think that that's the argument that you've left undeveloped, and that's a little bit problematic. At one point, when we're talking about the evidence in the argument, I thought, like I said, I heard some statistical information that I thought was maybe a little bit older. You did cite sources. A couple of times there were sources that I wasn't sure who they were. Who's the drugpolicy.org? I don't know who that is. Later on, you gave us more clear citations on some subsequent information. I appreciated that. Like I said, there's a lot of statistical information, but a couple of the things sounded old. There's some factual data on arrests. I thought that was fine. You had some information, some factual data about what we're spending on drug policy. How they came up to the figure about how much we would save by legalization, that probably needs to be explained a little bit more. You're depending upon your source to give us the justification there, and I think that you may need a little bit more information on that particular point. So the supporting information, you've got some good information, but there's also some gaps and some holes there. The presentation, I think you do a pretty good job speaking to the audience, keeping things organized. At the end, I thought you had a nice summary. You're usually trying to direct your attention to us, and everybody in the audience appreciates that when you're speaking to them. Thank you.